The city's hum dulled as the black car slid into the underground entrance of Governor Daniel King's residence. Bethany Shaw stepped out, her dark coat clinging to her damp skin, her pulse thrumming faster than the footsteps echoing in the garage. Every time she came here, she told herself it would be the last. And yet she was here again. Inside, the governor's study was warm, golden, a cocoon that seemed to dissolve the outside world. Bethany sat on the edge of a leather chair, her hands trembling in her lap. Daniel leaned closer, his fingers brushing against hers on the armrest. It was the softest touch, but it set her entire being aflame. "Bethany." His voice was low, coaxing, heavy with temptation. "You can't keep running from this. From us." Her breath caught. She thought of her husband waiting at home, a good man, patient but no longer blind. His silences had grown heavier, his questions sharper. Tonight, she had left him again with another excuse that sounded hollow even as she spoke it. His scotch glass was probably still in his hand, the untouched dinner still on the table. His patience was cracking and she knew it. But Daniel's eyes held her, and in them she saw not judgment but fire. A fire she could not resist. Yet guilt pressed in from another corner of her life. Her father, Reverend Shaw, had just that morning preached about temptation, his sermon echoing like an arrow to her heart. The wages of sin is death, and the cracks of betrayal destroy not only the sinner but the house they claim to love. Bethany had sat in the pew with her husband, her hands folded, pretending she wasn't already living the very sin he thundered against. And also trying very hard to ignore the guilt towards her husband. Here in Daniel's study, the two worlds collided. The loyal husband whose patience waned, the father whose faith demanded purity, and the man before her whose presence set her soul alight. She closed her eyes for a moment, torn apart by the weight of them both. But when she opened them, Daniel's hand was still there, steady, certain. And she let her fingers fall into his. It was a choice, not just against her husband's trust, but against her father's faith. And in that instant, Bethany Shaw crossed a line she could never return from. Outside the residence, thunder rolled through the night. Inside her home, her husband's glass shattered against the floor. In the quiet of his study, Reverend Shaw prayed harder than ever, sensing without knowing that his daughter was slipping away. Bethany had no idea, but the walls were closing in. And when they did, the collapse would be total. The weight of their choices grew heavier with every passing day. Bethany lived in two worlds now. The respectable wife of a decorated officer, and the trembling, desperate woman who gave her heart to a man she could never claim. Her husband's patience was cracking. He measured her absences in silence, his eyes sharp, his voice controlled. His uniform always pressed like armor against the chaos he suspected. At home, meals turned cold on the table. At church, her father's words lashed like a whip. The wages of sin is death. And yet, even as the walls closed in, Bethany could not turn away from Daniel King. One evening, beneath the lanterns of the governor's gardens, she slipped through the winding paths and found him waiting. The night was warm, the air thick with the scent of jasmine, and the shadows concealed what the world must never see. "Bethany," Daniel murmured, his voice carrying both longing and restraint. "Every time I see you, I fear it will be the last." Her chest rose and fell, her lips trembling with words she could not hold back. "Then let us steal this night, Daniel. Let us burn while we still can." And with that, the restraint broke. His hands cupped her face, his mouth met hers, and the kiss was not gentle. It was fire, desperate, hungry, as though they could consume the fear with their passion. Her body melted into his, her fingers clutching at the fabric of his coat, drawing him closer. The world beyond the hedges dissolved. There was only the press of his lips, the thunder of his heartbeat against hers, and the wild certainty that this was love worth any ruin. When at last they pulled apart, her breath came ragged, her cheeks flushed. Daniel pressed his forehead to hers. "This path leads nowhere," he whispered, his voice breaking. Her eyes shimmered in the lantern glow. Then let us walk it together, even if it ends in darkness." They held each other beneath the stars, clinging as if the night itself would tear them apart. But the garden had ears. A figure lingered in the shadows, a servant loyal to Bethany's husband, eyes narrowing with suspicion as he slipped away into the dark. Later, when Bethany returned home, the silence was suffocating. Her husband sat at the table, the dinner untouched, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His uniform jacket hung loose across his shoulders, his collar unbuttoned as though the weight of suspicion pressed against his chest. He said nothing. His gaze followed her every movement as she poured wine into his glass with trembling hands. "Long day," she whispered, forcing a smile. The silence was heavier than words. That Sunday in the great church, Reverend Shaw thundered from the pulpit, "Be sure your sins will find you out." His outstretched arms cast shadows like a judge's gavel striking final. Bethany sat rigid in the pew, her husband beside her, his hand gripping the bench in cold frustration. She bowed her head, her face pale, her heart torn. And though the congregation heard only her father's sermon, Bethany heard another voice entirely, Daniel's whisper, raw and trembling. "Then let us walk it together, even if it ends in darkness." The storm had not yet broken, but the clouds were black and merciless. The evening air in the governor's quarters hung heavy with tension. The shadowy figure who had seen Bethany and Daniel together could no longer keep the secret. Whispers spread like wildfire, hushed voices in the marketplace, cautious glances in the church pews, rumors laced with venom. Bethany felt their weight. Each word that wasn't said aloud seemed aimed at her. Every silence carried accusation. At night, Bethany lay awake in her chamber, staring at the ceiling beams while the clock ticked mercilessly. Her husband's breathing beside her was steady, yet it carried an edge, not peace but calculation. He was watching her, even in silence. She felt the walls closing in. Her father's sermons from the pulpit rang in her ears. Sin concealed will one day be shouted from the rooftops. Purity cannot live beside corruption. One night, in the shadows of the governor's garden, Daniel found her again. His voice trembled with urgency. Daniel says, "Bethany, we can't keep doing this. Too dangerous now. They're watching. Can feel it. We must leave. Tonight if we must." He clasped her hands, eyes desperate, pulling her closer. Bethany says, "Daniel, if we run, we lose everything. My name, my family, my father's trust. My husband will never forgive me. He will hunt us down." "Then let them hunt," Daniel says. "I only need you. Without you, none of this life means anything." Her lips quivered. The forbidden fire between them burned hotter in the shadows, but fear clung to her like a second skin. They both shared another passionate kiss, long and desperate, reassuring. That night, Bethany's husband finally confronted her. He sat in the dim glow of their chamber, his military jacket loosened, a glass of whiskey dangling from his hand. His voice was low, deliberate, more terrifying than if he had shouted. He says, "I know you've been slipping away, Bethany. Don't insult me with denial." Bethany's breath caught in her throat. "You carry my name, my honor. If you shame me, if you bring ruin upon me, I will see to it that you regret the day you were born." The whiskey glass slammed onto the table, its echo lingering like a gunshot. His patience was cracking, and she could see it. The very next day, Reverend Shaw summoned her. Alone in his study, the candlelight threw shadows across his stern features. The Reverend says, "Bethany, I sense unrest in you. Your spirit is divided. Do not think God is blind to the stains you try to hide." He clasped her hands tightly, his grip like iron. "You are your husband's wife," he continues, saying, "Obedience is your calling. Purity is your duty. You will not stray from the path I have set before you. Do you hear me, child?" Bethany nodded silently, but her heart screamed. Between her husband's iron hand and her father's iron faith, she was suffocating. That night, fate unraveled. Bethany tried once more to steal away, her cloak drawn tight, her footsteps swift across the moonlit path. But as she reached the garden's edge, Daniel appeared, and so did her husband. The soldier's voice cut like a blade. "So, it's true," her husband says. Bethany froze. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between them. Daniel tries to defend Bethany. "Don't lay this at her feet. If there is blame, it is mine." The husband's jaw clenched, his hand hovering at his side, where the weight of discipline and violence was never far away. Bethany's voice broke into a desperate plea. "Stop," Bethany says. "Please, both of you. If this destroys us, it destroys me. And I cannot survive that." The silence that followed was deadly. 3 lives balanced on the edge of a knife. Love, loyalty, and honor colliding under the cruel gaze of the night. And so it was. Love and fury, faith and betrayal, all crashing together beneath the same unforgiving moon. The episode ends with the 3 locked in a triangle of betrayal and defiance. Daniel's hand trembles, ready to defend her. Her husband's eyes burn with fury. Her father's voice echoes in her mind like a curse from above. Bethany stands trapped in the center, torn between her forbidden passion and the chains of blood and law. The storm has broken, and in the epilogue, someone will pay the price. The world did not sleep. By dawn, the images were everywhere. Bethany Shaw and Governor Daniel King, captured in fleeting moments of intimacy at a popular Nigerian Afrobeats musicians' concert. The stage lights glowed in the background, his voice carried across the crowd. But what the world saw was not the music, it was them. Hands brushing, eyes lingering, faces too close to deny. The internet did what it always does. Screenshotted, shared, judged, and also condemned. Bethany's husband sat in silence, the glow of his phone screen reflecting in his hardened eyes. The man who had fought wars abroad now fought humiliation at home. His wife was no longer just his, she was a headline. Her father, the respectable reverend, did not hesitate. By Sunday, his sermon was broadcast to millions online. "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man or woman sows," laying emphasis on the woman, "that shall he or she also reap." His voice thundered over loudspeakers and live streams alike, not just condemning sin, but condemning her. And Daniel King, the governor's mansion became a fortress. His publicist issued cold denials. His rivals circled like vultures, and whispers of resignation grew louder by the hour. But Bethany, she bore the sharpest weight. Alone in her room, the curtains drawn tight, she scrolled through her phone, her fingers trembling. Every post, every headline, her name burned beside Daniel's. Her shame was no longer secret. It was immortalized in pixels and rage. Her breath hitched, her eyes wet, as she whispered into the empty room. "Daniel, what have we done?" And then it happened. Soft vibration. A new notification. Not a news alert. Not a tagged post. Direct message. The sender's name. Unknown. Her thumb hesitated, her pulse hammering in her chest, before she opened it. 5 words glared back at her, sharp as a blade. "This is only the beginning." Her eyes widened. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. The clock ticked once, heavy in the silence. And then darkness.
Would you like to find out what eventually happened? Send a comment to let us know. Thanks for viewing this second part of this compelling story. Please continue to enjoy our unequal love stories of forbidden truths. Just check our channel for more stories. We promise to keep you entertained. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe.